my parents now near Good Thunder, so I'm hanging out with them, helping them out, and I'm doing my art there. The presentation I'm giving today will be about my artist-in-residencies, which I'll put up on the screen. Let's see, share screen, and you'll be able to see, hopefully. Can you see that? That is a list of the places and residencies I've been doing since 2009.
If you want to hit, Daniel, if you want to hit the first play from start in the upper left-hand corner, it'll go to full screen.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, this is my first Zoom, so you'll see right here, play from start. Okay. Oh, thanks. That looks much better. Thank you. So, yeah, I've been, since 2009, I started doing residencies, and I wanted to create my own. A lot of artists and a lot of residencies are based in foundations or organizations where artists will, send in an application and get some partial funding or get a place to stay. And oftentimes it's with other artists. And they will be able to connect with other artists, do work, and it can last anywhere between a few days to a few months or sometimes longer. So, but I wanted to be more creative and do my own thing and try to figure out how to do connection with community and do art with community and do my own art in relation to being in a community. I've done a lot of traveling, and I lived in Japan for a year and a half and did art there and taught English. I was in Guatemala for a couple months, and I got this idea when I was in New York City. I was going to the Art Students League in New York, teaching preschool art at the Rockefeller University. And so I wanted to venture out. Partly, I wanted to go to Africa first because of my complete ignorance. I really felt like I needed to go there just because I thought I really don't know much about Africa besides what we're given in the news, which is often very negative. So I really wanted to see for myself and experience for myself a place in Africa. And I was originally going to go to Ethiopia. My friend got married to an Ethiopian, so I thought, well, that'd be a good place. But gradually I came to believe Ghana would be a good place in West Africa. And so I started just looking into West Africa, looking into Ghana. It first came about because I saw a soccer match, World Cup match between the US and Ghana. And I saw the Ghanaians super happy and super enjoying beating the US in this World Cup back in 2006. And I was in Astoria, Queens, where I was living. And so it kind of got me thinking about Ghana, and it just started asking around, started talking to people. And how these residencies have developed has been basically me just doing some research, but also just talking to as many people as I could and basically sending out signals. So I moved back to Minneapolis in 2007 to save up money because I knew I needed to get a big chunk of money saved up for these projects. So I worked at banquet serving, worked in group homes, doing overnight sleep in group homes with people with disabilities, which I've had lots of experience with, and did various other jobs, dog sitting, staying with my cousin for a really low rent. And I asked around a bunch of friends, and they led me to a gallery in North Minneapolis whose son, these owners had a son who was in the Peace Corps. And so he invited me to come to his house, which a family that he lived with. He left the Peace Corps, and then he said I could take the room that he stayed in, and he introduced me to this whole community, a small town. It's a few thousand people, but it's northwest of Kumasi in Ghana in the Ashanti region, which that region is famous for their weavings, famous for a lot of their crafts. So I was excited to go there, and I was interested in seeing. Ghana is also a good model for Africa as far as they've had several exchanges with democracies, exchanging governments, and very peaceful exchanges, and they have a fairly good economic model. So I thought this would be a good place to start out. So in 2009, I went there for 9 months. I'll show you a photo. And basically you can see that what I'm trying to do is connect. You can see on my sheet there, and connect, witness, share, learn, create, document, weave, and just engage in community. I do a lot on social media. I keep a journal on Facebook. I post a lot of photos on Flickr, and you can see all my sites down here. If you want to, if anyone's interested, you can go to my Flickr page, which I don't seem to have anyway on there, but you can go to my website and then go to my photos, and that will take you to my Flickr page. Whoops. And that will show you like dozens and dozens of albums of photos. So there's communities of engagement with different activities I do, a lot of my art, and I do a lot with children's art. So I'll take you through some of that right now. And I'll show you some of the art I do, which is based on a lot of what I do is try to connect with the environment. So this is a big collage that I did. This is my friend who's the family member that I stayed with. So I stayed with a house with his brother and his brother's children. And the room I had was $50 a month, which is like 5 times more than what typical rent is. So it's very manageable for me to go there and do my work. And I bring, you know, books for the libraries there, and I bring a lot of different things for the family. But this artwork was made, I discovered the soil. All this brown here is laterite soil that I was able to mix with oil and water to create like a watercolor. And so I added it to this office paper. These are all just sheets of office paper that are A4 size that I've cut up or glued together with white glue. And I use charcoal too to make it even darker. So any of these dark areas, I crushed charcoal, which is all really common. And this wonderful brown laterite soil really created a nice rich tone and color that I use. So I wanted to just focus on that, and I used white paint also. So I sprayed it with hairspray to kind of a fixative and as a way to kind of protect it in other ways. But I use a lot of symbologies in my art, you know, like these are yams that are really common, and you see them stacked up in Ghana, pestles, and mortars, and that they use for smashing to make their food, which is fufu, and stars is part of the flag for independence. They used a black star in their flag in Ghana. So this folds up actually like a blanket or big towel, and it fits into my suitcase, which is only, you know, like a typical large suitcase. So I was able to carry almost all my art back with me in a large suitcase and a small suitcase and a carry-on. And when I go to these communities, I bring 2 suitcases, both maxed out at 50 pounds. One little suitcase that's full of books, art books, children's books, and various publications that I give to the libraries that I'm involved with. Some are art spaces, art libraries for cultural centers, and some are children's libraries and the libraries in the community. And this village had a library. So I brought artwork, I brought all sorts of materials for the library. And this, yeah, this is underneath my parents' bed right now. So it's kind of like tucked away with lots of other artworks that are at my parents' house. So I'll keep moving on, but you can, this is at the area council hall where we had an exhibition in 2011. So this is, I bring art, this is, a lot of this art I brought back in 2009. And this is an exhibition I had in North Minneapolis in 2010. Pretty much the only thing I didn't bring back was this drum and all the soil that was from my parents' place. And of course the bucket, but like this mirror was a broken mirror that I was able to put together in a mosaic. These ropes are from the community I live in. These brooms were made right in, you can see hopefully with the cursor, that these brooms were made in the village from a woman that I bought them from, and that's a common way that people clean their floors. And you know, they love football, soccer. The kids are really into it, so I put certain cultural images that remind me of the community, connect me with the community. These are like anthills. Anthills are these huge, they're like 6 feet, 7 feet high, some of them, and they're just filled with ants. So I just created like little symbols of anthills that kind of circle around. And you know, Twi is the language of Ghana. So I used, you can't really see it very clearly, but these are words in Twi, T-W-I. So they speak Twi, which I only learned a little bit. It's an English colony, so some people can speak English and can translate. So And there's another big collage. So I have these exhibitions in Minneapolis also that connect people here with the community that I'm involved with. So this is Ecuador. So I ended up going to Ecuador in 2011. And I was doing the census in 2010. And I lived in Northeast Minneapolis with my cousin. And I was thinking I'm going to Chile for South America. After Ghana, I thought, well, I want to go to another continent and do a residency there. And I was planning on going for 9 months because it seemed to work out with visa-wise for Ghana to go for 9 months and really embed myself in the community. But it also kind of felt symbolic too. It was kind of like a gestation period for me to be reborn in a new community and become part of another culture and learn from that, and also just change, kind of a sense of my own transformation from learning from this community. So when I was doing the census in 2010, all my neighbors were Ecuadorians, and they were super kind, super really wonderful people. So it made me start thinking about Ecuador. And I started asking around. I remember going to the Wells Fargo's bank on Central Avenue and said, what restaurant would you recommend as the most authentic Ecuadorian restaurant? And this woman said, the one on 29th and Central called Chimborazo. So I just went up to this restaurant to kind of experience it. And the server was a white woman, and I asked her if she had been to Ecuador. And she said, no, but the owner of the restaurant is in the kitchen. I'll bring him out. So he came out and he sat down with me, and I was just thinking I was just going to talk to him for a few minutes and ask him some questions about information, about where to go, what to look for, just to gather ideas and get some connections maybe. But after me explaining what I did in Ghana, working with children, working with other artists, working with the community, and bringing books for libraries and all that, he just said, well, I have a house down there that's not being used right now. I'd like someone to be in there. And he just offered, after this short period of time, he offered his house to me and said, you can stay there for free, just pay the utilities. So that pretty much just got the balls rolling really quickly for me. And it was in a very interesting indigenous community that you can see a lot of the traditional clothing here. And they're Kanyari. That's the name of the peoples. The Kanyari people, and they're noted especially for these white kind of wool hats. I kind of started making a whole bunch of these. They're kind of like made out of paper and newspapers. They speak Quechua, which is the Incan language. The Incans came up there in the 1400s. And so they speak Quechua and Spanish. So I spoke Spanish enough that I could communicate with people, but I had to learn some Quechua. I tried to. And very traditional and very proud, strong identity. And this is in what is now the library, but they recreated this old convent and this old church that now is an ecotourism center where they teach Quechua, they teach medicinal herbs, and they teach about their culture, dances, music. And she's one of the cultural leaders who I help teach English to. And she is studying at the university right now, but she works with the tourism board in the community. And they have groups come from a lot of times from France and Spain, and some from the US and many places. And they stay for a few days and they do cultural tours and learn about the culture. It's kind of a unique way, and it also sustains their language and their culture. So I wanted to really support that. So I helped with the library. And this was the exhibition we had in 2011 or 2012. It was in February 2012. And it was a festival for Carnival right before Lent. So it's a really big event. And we had artists come. I invited artists to send work from all over. So my friends in the States sent art down. An artist friend in Japan, artists from Ecuador brought their art, and some artists came. So it was like a big event. And this is my art that I did in 2011 and 2012 that I brought back. And some of this, was easy to carry. All these frames I got here, but these are pictures of all the animals It's a very rural community. Of course, it's at 10,000 feet. So it's cold and freezing at night with 2 big wool blankets. And it's in the mountains in the Andes. So it's very big. These are all photos of potatoes that I collected, documented photos of these. There's so many different types of potatoes. And there's like 7 main ones, but there's like hundreds of varieties in Ecuador. They're really knowledgeable about the types of potatoes and love potatoes. And I milk cows with the family, the restaurant owner's family, Chimborazo. Some of these photos are in his restaurant. So if you're looking for a good Ecuadorian restaurant, 29th and Central is the place to see them. So you might want to check that out sometime. I'm going to get going here with, this is my Vietnam exhibition. So I went to Vietnam in 2015. And that was like another experience where I was thinking on going to Nepal, but my friends left there. So I ended up talking to people, and there was a gallery owner in Minneapolis who kind of guided me to some artists. So I lived in Vietnam in 9 months in 2015. This art, a lot of these are collages made from receipts and from my brochures. I'm in the Hanoi, I'm in a city, so it's a totally different experience for me. And I'm much more engaged with other artists. And this is a women's arts collective that I had this exhibition in. And so a lot of this work is dealing with memory, my own personal kind of diary of my consumption, what I was doing there. And this wasn't a big residency that was more formal. And this is another huge collage that I could fold up into my suitcase. And it's full of receipts, full of food wrappers, full of many different types of, oh, it doesn't look very clear for some reason. Didn't upload maybe, but it's full of everything that I collected, all these little papers, and I paint over it. So it's not like memory, how you lose parts of memory, you still can gather information from the little bits that you can still see, but a lot of it gets kind of layered and covered and lost. And there's trails of orange dots, which, you know, with the trails with the Vietnam War, I kind of engage with my own history, with the orange being like Agent Orange, but also with the color of Buddhism, the saffron robes, and the trail of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which I would see all the time as far as in maps and different things. So these are friends of mine, and this was a big formal exhibition. This is back at Ghana at the area council hall. And this is an artist that lived in the village. So I try to support as many artists as I can. And he would have these amazing, these are made out of cardboard with windows that are made out of plastics. And he made these right in the village. So whenever I had an exhibition, he would be a part of it. And so we had wonderful, like, wonderful exhibitions with many artists, and his work really stood out, and many people really liked it. So it was fun that he could be a part of it. This is children working in the room now. This used to be soil when I came in 2009. It was just a dirt floor. But gradually it's been filled up. And an artist from Ecuador, I bought this painting for like $35 from a friend of mine, and these children are in Ghana drawing it. So there's like this kind of weaving, connecting. I put children's art from Vietnam and Ecuador up here. Later on, you'll see, if you look at my other photos, it's up on the walls, and they often will look at that. And we do all sorts of things. I try to work with children in a way that gives them a lot of freedom. I might just lay out materials and say, use these. So they have to use their own initiative and not just be dependent on someone telling them what to do. And they'll come up with amazing ideas without me interfering. But I might just say, you know, like this one, I just said, push out of the rectangle, try to do something outside of the, you know, the paper. She just kept on adding strips and made this really interesting composition. Lots of layers, and I try to just give them a little encouragement, but let them come up with their own ideas. And then we did earth art. So we just created stones, just using stones, because it's just something really sustainable, nothing exotic, nothing that is reliant or dependent on me. So they can just always just have stones around. This is like typical, the soil. And so these are some of the neighbor children that we just started. I just did an example, one example, and then they learned from that, and then they start doing their own thing. So some use leaves and glass, tile, things that were just laying around, garbage. So lots of different ideas. My neighbor boy, I've worked with him since 2009 when he was 5. Now he's like 15. So she was active. a lot coming over. So they just come in. It's very informal, like a drop-in center. So whenever I'm around the house, kids would come by and do art if I'm available. And we would just make art, do a lot of drawing, then we'd go outside and do these kind of works. And we had a big festival. This was in 2020. And this festival had about 300 children, and there were dances. This is kind of like a theatrical dance, very dramatic. And these girls did a dance. There were poetry readings. This is all children's art from Vietnam with the children's organizations I work with there. And these are my collages. And we had a library full of art. So back in Ecuador, this is the informal drop-in center at the house I stayed in. So I had children's art on the walls, books, many books from Capstone Press, because I had connections there through my Uncle Bob Coughlin. And we just laid out books, laid out materials, and the children would come up with their own ideas, often using recyclables that I gathered. And then we just kind of work, kind of like a workshop. This is a mural that we did. And I kind of designed it, and then we had some of the kids, and this is for their ecotourism. So they have lots of walls, so it seemed like a good idea to do that. And it's kind of right above their ecotourism hotel. And a little boy working with me. They did the bottom. This was in 2018. We were working there. Lots of teenagers helped out. And this artist was from Cuenca. I invited him up. He's a really good artist. So I bring up other artists to kind of engage them. This is at Vietnam Friendship Village. And this is where I started working in 2015. And they're all children and adults with some form of disability. And a lot of them, it was started by a US vet back in the early 2000s or late 90s. And this US veteran wanted a place. So a lot of these children and adults come from regions that were really affected by Agent Orange, the defoliant that was super toxic, that the US Army used to clean out the foliage of the jungles. And of course, many of you know that many US soldiers have been affected by Agent Orange, but it's still in the ground, it's still in the groundwater, and there's, in these regions, there's high birth defects. So this US veteran wanted to help them. And so I go here and do art, and we just set up these tables, and we have painting, use colored pencils, crayons, and just work once a week. And it's a wonderful place. People are really great, really engaging, and they make some of my favorite art. I let them work on their own style, their own design. I might, suggest collage or suggest using certain types of techniques, but for the most part, I just like to see what they do. And they work really interestingly and create a lot of really interesting abstract pieces. And some love certain stylizations. Like she always loves to create these amazing lines with layers of crayon. And she likes to keep lots of white space with one shape, which I can really appreciate too. So it's a great place to go to. And I go to also this Blossom House for girls in Hanoi. And it's a foster home for girls. And I didn't realize that until after 3 months that this is run by a mother and daughter. It started by a father and daughter from Prior Lake, Minnesota. I met her and I realized this is like a Minnesota-based organization called HSCD, Human Services for Vietnam. HSCD, I haven't said it for a long time. Yeah, but it's like a organization for Vietnamese in villages and different places. And they also, this foster home for girls is to protect these girls because China, there's a big problem with China being the one-child policy and having an overabundance of males, that a lot of times in Vietnam, people sell and abduct young girls and women to take to China, either to exploit them. They trick them into believing that they're going there for work or a factory or something that makes them feel like they're going to be going for a better life. But they end up going there and being either forced into marriage or put into a brothel. So there's a lot of concern about that. And so this place helps to protect these girls. So I go and work with them and paint. We just sit around and I use recyclables like toilet paper, dispensers, and these little yogurt containers and newspapers, old magazines from the airlines I like to take. So we try doing a lot of different things and just have an experience of creating. So I really try to just focus on creativity and trying to just get them to think in possibilities in different ways. This is Blue Dragon Children's Foundation. And this is also a place that's kind of for protected children, usually street children. It's an Australian organization. And also, you know, a lot of these children, like boys, are preyed upon by pedophiles because they're homeless, or they left their homes and they're living in parks or outside. So this is a refuge, a place where they can get education. And it's a wonderful organization. So I'm really glad to be a part of them. And this is from 2019. They asked me to help coordinate this mural. So I I just asked them to come up with ideas and think of design. And then I kind of helped with the composition and helped them with projecting it on the screen. So that way they can not be nervous about their ability, because a lot of children feel like they're not artists or don't feel like they can draw. So I said, well, let's just project these images. They can choose the images. So these images were found on the internet, and we had a DVD projector. And so we could project them and they could trace them. And then we all worked on it during this time in 2019. And I was there for 3.5 months. So after my first 9 months, usually in Ghana, I stay for 2 months. I've been to Ghana 5 times now. I've been to Ecuador 3 times. This would have been my 4th time, where I usually stay 3 months because of visa issues. And then in Vietnam, it's really easy. They really make it simple to get visas and to travel. So I've stayed 6 months one time. I've been there 4 times. Usually 3.5 months is what I stay for. And then I can work in these organizations. I don't have a place like in Ghana and Ecuador. I work from my home, and this is more like working with organizations. This is an exhibition in North Minneapolis at the gallery of the family who had the Peace Corps volunteer who I stayed with in Ghana. So it's really kind of a nice personal connection. This was a fundraiser for those 3 organizations, for Blossom House, for Friendship Village, and for Blue Dragon. You might know Sister Joyce Colbett from Vine. That's her up in North Minneapolis. And there's some other Mankato connections in here. Family, my Gemlos. You know any Gemlos? That's my mom's maiden name. So we had a big event, and that was really fun. I've done it at the same place for Ecuador and for children's art in Ghana. So it's kind of a nice base for my children's art exhibits. This is the library in Ghana, and I help with bringing artwork. So it's kind of like a contemporary art, interesting kind of a space with photo albums from my projects with children's art from Vietnam and Ghana and Ecuador. Art, a lot of Mankato artists are in this exhibit. That's Brian Frink's work. It's hard to see because of the reflection. Hope Cook from the Carnegie. This is her piece. Olivia Sirik, who worked at 410 Project, and Abby Dalecki, who's also a Mankato artist. This is from Ecuador, from a center for people with disabilities. Friends of mine from Minneapolis, my friend from Japan. This is Jerry Weiss, who was an art professor at Mankato State in the early 70s. He was a printmaker. He was a family friend. And so I bring books, magazines, and keep kind of adding to the library. And so I use them in my projects too. This is the library in Ecuador. And they didn't really have a library until I came, so I suggested, they built the shelves, and then I suggested we could have a community library where children can come. And a lot of these books are from Capstone, and they're in Spanish. So they were able to read them in Spanish, and some are in English so they can learn English. And a lot of people are trying to learn English because they come to the US or they're doing tourism. Another artwork by Brian Frank. He's been wonderful. Artists will often donate their artwork to me, and then I will be able to, use it as kind of an interchange. It's kind of an example of just connecting and sharing. So that's really wonderful. This is part of their permanent kind of collection. And on the other wall, they have all their pottery and old kind of cultural community kind of artifacts and stuff. So, and lots of photo albums again from the other communities. So And I teach English when I'm there. This is a group that I worked with for 6 weeks in 2009. Oh, thanks. So this was in 2009, and we were, or not 2011, sorry. And so we all were learning English, and I help out with their community tourism with English because they get a lot of tourists from other countries, and they want to learn. A lot of them have families in Minneapolis, which is really fun. So when I take photos, I can share it with their families. And this was before like cell phones were really popular. So I was able to share with some of their parents, grandchildren, and everybody could see. They were really happy about that. But now everyone can share things, which is really great. They can post things on the internet and post it on their phone and share it with people. So, and I document a lot about community events. This was for Carnival. And this is called the Pampa Mesa, which is a common kind of Ecuadorian thing in the Canary people. It's kind of like a potluck or big picnic. But when a large group of people get together, you know, they have a community meal. And so this is all lined with hominy, which is large corn, which is boiled, which is really tasty, and little potatoes, which is like hand boiled potatoes, which is like hand food, which are really delicious too, and fava beans. So you just eat them all, or you put them in your soup, which is made of chicken usually or beef, in a nice broth. And then you add the fava beans, hominy, and potatoes in there, and just eat it like finger food. So they were just a really wonderful community of people that I really got connected with and really enjoyed. And they keep in touch. We sometimes will write to each other and stuff. And they have some traditional ponchos and traditional hats, and many are musicians and sing, and almost all of them are farmers. So they're really engaged in farming corn and lots of cows and chickens and potatoes and many other products too. Really industrious, hardworking, and it's really amazing what they can do on these mountains. I mean, I'm barely walking on this trail up a mountain. We're taking cows up to a pasture for grass, and I'm trying to keep my balance. And the young woman who's taking them up, my friend, she's knitting a sweater while she's going up the mountain, just working away while she's bringing the cows up to a higher pasture, and I'm trying to keep my balance. So it's incredible some of the things I saw that they were doing. This is some of the scenery. I like to document a lot of the scenery. This is just below my house where I was staying. This is their cemetery in the village. And just beautiful in the Andes at 10,000 feet, just gorgeous countrysides and great views. Their largest Incan ruin in Ecuador is just a 50-minute walk from here, just a couple miles. So I would walk to these Incan ruins. But yeah, my house is right up to the left that I stayed at. I had a whole house to myself, 2 floors, so I could work on my art in one room, work on other spaces. So let's see, did I lose something? I don't know.
I think that's the end of the show.
Oh, it might be the end. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm surprised. Yeah, that's good. I thought I had more. Anyway, I'll go back to the first page so you can see some of the spaces. So I was hoping to go this summer again to Ecuador, and that would be it. But basically, yeah, I'm working at these 3 different organizations, and then in Ghana, I'm working with a girls' organization here. And so you can always look up these websites if you're interested in learning more about those organizations that I work with. So feel free to go to my website too and look in my photo section, my albums. The albums is where you can find many, many more photos if you have any more interest in this. And I hope to continue doing this. My ultimate goal, this I don't know if I'll do, but it kind of came to me that I thought, well, if I could go to a community in Europe and a community in Australia, that would be like do 6 other continents. And I'm really connected to North Minneapolis where I'm doing a mural right now. So that's kind of like my community right now. So eventually I'm thinking Istanbul, Turkey. I was actually thinking next year, but I don't think it's going to work out. But Istanbul's 2/3 Europe. And I thought they have a big biennial there. They have a lot of contemporary art there and really interesting culture with Muslim culture. So that's eventually where I would like to go for my Europe. And for my residency there. And then eventually I want to go to Australia. And if I could, possibly work with Aboriginal artists. That would be my plan. It would be, you know, something where I'd have to get invited by, and I have some friends who know Aboriginal artists, so I would need an invitation. I would need to really be careful and be very sensitive about everything. So I would hope someday to do that eventually too. But that, you know, it depends on my stamina, and also I don't want to get spread out too fast too soon. So I really want to stay rooted and connected with these communities I'm already involved with. So I hope to just keep coming back to Ecuador, Ghana, Vietnam for as much as I can until I die. Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate you all for listening to me, and you know, we can have questions. You're welcome to ask me any questions also.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel, very much. And if people want, we have a few minutes. If people have a couple of questions, go ahead and ask.
So Daniel, I'd like to ask you, do you connect to other artists like you who are world travelers and, you know, want to integrate these cultural experiences? Is there any like any informal linking you do with?
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to. Yes, all the time. It seems like it happens where I'm sharing on the internet. With Facebook's a really big tool for that, and I'll connect with other artists so they know what I do, and they'll connect me with artists who are doing similar things. But a lot of what I do too is mainly connect. My main interest is to connect with the artists in the community. So in Hanoi, I really have a lot of opportunity to work with artists because I'm in the city and there's got a huge community of artists there that I work with, you know, Hanoian artists. And I did teach English for a few months, and I still help out friends with whatever they're working on if they're doing applications. I help an art space in Vietnam and Hanoi with their kind of announcements and with their exhibition information. I'll do all the kind of proofreading and correcting of the English. So I try to engage with artists in art spaces, and I'll bring books for the libraries in Hanoi. In Ghana, I have to go to Kumasi, where I know a few artists, which is an hour and a half from the village. And I work with local artists and artisans in the village too, that I've gotten to know. There's a mayor of a village only 2 miles away from the village I am in Ghana who went to art school and is a really good artist. So he's a great friend of mine. He owns a bar, so I go to his bar and we hang out. And he's a really dynamic guy. So it's been really, I've been really fortunate that way. And to go to art exhibits, I try to attend art exhibits and art events. So in Accra, which is the largest city in Ghana, I've got 2 libraries that I bring books for. A lot of local poets I bring books to, like, well, Carrie Waterman she's in the cities now, but I grew up with her, and she taught me at Wilson and she taught at Mankato State. So I bring poetry. I brought Richard Robbins' poetry and CDs. Jack Allop, a friend of mine who grew up in Mankato, I brought his CD to Ecuador and to Ghana and Vietnam. So a lot of different kind of artists that I know, I try to share their work, and I share what I do with these other artists that I know who are traveling also. And we share ideas and get ideas from each other too. Ecuador, I have a couple spaces that I bring books and art stuff for, and I connect with artists in Cuenca, which is 2 hours away. It's a big community, colonial. It's the 3rd largest city in Ecuador, and it's a colonial village right along a river. A lot of expats from the US are there too. So thanks. Yeah, hope that answers it.
Dan?
Daniel, I have one.
What has most,
Oh, sorry.
that's all right. Hi, Daniel. Thank you for this. It's wonderful. What has most impacted you in your travels doing your work?
I guess breaking down, I think stereotypes, you know, has really been good. Just expanding my awareness and knowledge of other people. You know, we tend to live in very simplistic kind of ideas about the other. And, you know, for me to go and really connect, and I've been a backpacker and I've traveled to spaces, and I didn't want to just pop in and out or just spend a couple weeks. I really wanted to be a part of a community and really learn more. And so that kind of really has been satisfying to feel like I'm really involved in people's lives and learning just a lot more depth of human interactions and different cultures, and being aware of my own kind of ignorance and my, just making mistakes all the time of being culturally insensitive or just silly things that I do that I, just different awareness of time, and I'm learning just to adjust the way I deal with time being in another culture, and how we can be very uptight and, too rigid, and our culture can be, good in some ways that way and good and not good in some ways. So I try to just always weigh out the good and bad in every culture and learn